we're going to it, about to jump into functional mushrooms. So I'm super excited to get into it. So we have close to 200 participants who signed up for this. I taught this class in Telluride for the Telluride Mushroom Festival and got such great feedback. You know, I wanted to offer it to everyone who couldn't get to the festival and didn't have a chance to tune in to the online festival. And so we're going to go deep. This is really a class for beginners. This is a class for, you know, super experts. This is all around talking about the evolution of mushrooms and fungi, talking about, you know, any myths. We're going to bust a bunch of those. I'm going to give it a second for people just entering. We had some technical difficulties, as I'm sure you might have guessed. Zoom kicked us out of our original account and wouldn't let us log back in. So I had to make a whole new Zoom account, whole new event. Here we are. This is going to be recorded. I'm probably, you know, at this point, we're probably going to go close to 6 CST, so almost 2 hours. And, you know, if you got to leave early, no worries at all. So let's jump into this. Feel free to use the chat. I would love to know where people are coming from, any questions that you have. I will answer every single one of them, hopefully, unless it's incredibly outrageous, but I'm pretty flexible on the fly. I will answer any questions that you guys have. So hopefully people can use the chat. And in a second, I will share my screen. This is going to be a PowerPoint mostly. So you got a ton of great visuals. So you don't have to look at my face the whole time. But usually when we do these things, we have people come from all around the world, which is so exciting. You know, there are mycophilic cultures and mycophobic cultures. So cultures that love mushrooms and also are very phobic. Here in the United States, we're transitioning from a mycophobic culture, so, you know, a culture that doesn't really embrace mushrooms that much, to more mycophilic, so one that loves mushrooms. We're part of a shroom boom right now. So I'm excited to, you know, help light the torch and get that going. So I'm just pulling up this slide right now so we can get onto it. And please use the chat. I want to hear where people are tuning in from. I got to re-log into everything. But in the meantime, I want to hear from you guys. I hope everyone is having a good Tuesday. Hey, Nathan, how you doing? Some San Francisco. Awesome. We got Michael from an island in Washington, which is super cool. Ferry ride from Seattle. That is really great. That is super cool. I would love, we got someone from Italy. That's super awesome. Australia. It's so amazing to see so many people all around the world joining these events, geeking out about mushrooms. Like, this is what it's all about, you know? I'm really excited to see people. We got Austin, Texas. That's where I'm from, tuning in from Austin, Texas. I'm in my kitchen right now in Austin, Texas. We got Missouri, which is great, New York City. All right, we are into our account finally. So now we can start this puppy up and get right into it. So I'm going to share my screen here. And hopefully y'all can see that. And I'm going to do full. Let's do present. This is the power of mushrooms. So I'm going to get all these screens together so I can see my slides. Oh boy. All right. A lot of technical fun stuff today. Power of mushrooms. Mushrooms come in all shapes and sizes and colors. They can be as big on the left or, as small as your fingernail. The one on the right is from Ecuador. And, that was actually the biggest of the bunch right there. Let's see if I can exit this out. Great. And surprisingly, we share over 50% of our DNA with fungi. We're actually closer related to fungi than we are to plants. And humans have such a rich relationship with plants and vegetables. We have plants growing in our houses, but it's kind of rare to see someone growing mushrooms in their house. But we actually are closer related to fungi than we are to plants. And a lot of people think of fungi as very alien, right? It's something super weird or far off, but we are actually closer related to them. And there's a theory, that they came from outer space, right? They're so alien, maybe they are. And this theory is called Panspermia, right? That spores were hidden in an asteroid or a meteor and landed on planet Earth, and fungi appeared. Now, this seems like a pretty far off phenomenon, but really it's not too far off if you look at how resilient fungi are. So this is an example. Researchers found, up to 69 different types of fungi underneath the ocean. And some were up to 20 million years old. This is an example of a Schizophilum species that they found spores underneath the ocean. They put it on a Petri plate, and it not only grew out the mycelium or the roots of the mushroom, but an actual mushroom. This is like finding a 20 million year old apple tree seed underneath the ocean, and they plant it in soil. Not only does it grow an apple tree, but apples on the tree that you can pick and eat alongside of it. So it's pretty incredible, the resilience of fungi. They're grown all around the world on every single continent, including Antarctica, in the snow. They can survive in Chernobyl, one of the most radioactive places on planet Earth. And because that they are so resilient, they have a bunch of compounds and enzymes and really cool stuff that humans can use for their own health and wellness or beyond. And one use is actually using fungi in space, right? So those fungi in Chernobyl were solely surviving off those radioactive isotopes as a food source. And so astronauts are looking towards fungi to use it as a barrier against radiation for astronauts, and even using it on Earth for some sort of a natural sunscreen. And fungi have been shown to survive in space. Some researchers threw a piece of lichen, which is mostly fungi, outside of a space station and brought it back on board after 6 months, and it continued growing like nothing happened. Now, to really talk about fungi, to talk about functional mushrooms, we have to go back to the beginning, right? How did they evolve over time? What is the first evidence of life? Right? So we get these cyanobacteria mounds is the first terrestrial life that we can find. The oldest fungi ever found was 1 billion years old in these low aquatic areas. And the first terrestrial or land fungi that we found was 810 million years ago in the Congo. Now, over time, these cyanobacteria and these fungi formed this symbiotic relationship. So this is the first evidence of symbiosis of life on our planet between fungi and the cyanobacteria or algae to form lichen. And I'm sure everyone has seen these structures on rocks or park benches or trees. They can be yellow or green or bluish color, purple even. And they formed about 700 million years ago. And that's kind of the first precursor to early plants, right? We get these early plants which form mycorrhizal fungi, which in the beginning were plant roots, right? Like plants didn't have roots in the beginning. And these fungi acted as a sort of crutch for plants, almost like a precursor to early plant roots. And we get these massive structures called prototaxites around 430 million years ago. And these are, huge structures that are almost 30 meters high. And a lot of people thought when they first excavated them that they were early trees. They even had rings of a tree. And when they did analysis, they figured out this was about 90% fungi. So this was a big lichen structure. On the right, you can see kind of an image of what it might have looked like, right? And my theory is that, yeah, these are the precursor to trees that we see today. And so when we look outside, we're seeing the ancestors of fungi, and we're seeing the ancestors of this symbiosis. And so mycorrhizal fungi, it's one of the most amazing classes of fungi that connect to over 95% of terrestrial plants. And the plants that we know today are pretty much puppets for fungi. And so over time, fungi formed this relationship, started building these plants, and then kind of burrowed underground to make soil that we know today, and started breaking down that rock structure to form this mycelial internet, right? And so they're connecting all the plants in this new forest, this new plant ecosystem, and trading nutrients, and it becomes the mycelial highways of our soil. And about 420 million years ago, we get arthropods, so insects like this ant right here. They start coming on the terrestrial land and burrowing underground, right? If anyone's seen an ant mound, right, underneath the ground, it's mass cavities and apartments for these insects. And as a food source, especially over mass extinctions, they're nibbling on plant roots, right? They're nibbling on fungi. And so, like any biological organism, as a defense against insects, their fungi are excreting all these crazy compounds. And it took a while for fungi to evolve these structures called mushrooms, which were modern day reproductive structures of mushrooms that we know, we see in grocery stores, etc. And around that same time, we get evidence of cordyceps. So these mushrooms actually attacking the insects as a defense against them nibbling on them or these plant roots. And so they start excreting all these crazy compounds like ergotamine, one of the precursors of LSD, right? So all these psychedelic compounds are excreted from fungi into these insects as a defense mechanism. We see, with cicadas, recently we had Brood X start to emerge, and Brood X was this group of cicadas that come out every, I believe, 14 years, and this fungi attacks them and excretes cathinone. Other species excrete psilocybin or psilocin into these insects. So we see all these examples of these psychedelic drugs being, injected into these insects. We see, ibotenic acid, which converts into muscimol, which are the main compounds of the fly agaric mushroom, or Amanita muscaria, that red and white mushroom that everyone has on the emojis of their phone, and they probably see them on Christmas cards and things like that. This mushroom is excreting it in a cicada, those compounds. And we see on and on all these, alkaloids being excreted by these fungi. And it's interesting because indigenous medicine people in present day Mexico used some of these mushrooms in ceremony. And so maybe we got a hint of this early evolution. And so over time, mushrooms broke away. And so we get this chemical warfare going on. And the reason I brought this up, because you know, psychedelic mushrooms are one class. Functional mushrooms are another. But it shows that because they're living in this harsh environment, they're forced to make all these crazy classes of compounds that can be beneficial for human use. So over time, mushrooms parted ways with plants and started producing these structures called mushrooms. And over our 10 million year evolution, we started to have a relationship with these mushrooms that were popping out of the ground. And so there's a known theory called the stoned ape theory that our early humanoid ancestors were stumbling upon mushrooms growing out of dung. Now, our early ancestors, some of them could have been exploring insects for food, and some of them might have been infected with this fungi, which had these class of compounds. So that might have been the first, evidence of human use of, fungi containing compounds that altered our state. And so this is a representation of that stoned ape theory. And the theory even goes to say that it influenced our human evolution. Now, the first real tangible evidence of human use of eating fungi was around 17,000 BC. So we get the Red Lady of El Meron, and she was found with 2 types of mushroom spores in her teeth. And so she was eating these, I believe it was a rusula and a bolete, as a food source. And the earliest art we get in northern Algeria in 4700 BC, we get all these mushroom paintings, and this really famous one called the bee shaman, which is a combination of a mushroom, a bee, and a human. We get art in Spain. We get Utsi the Iceman in 3300 BC, which is the oldest naturally preserved human ever found. And he was actually found with 2 types of mushrooms that you can find all over. So the top right is birch polypore, and then the bottom one is tinderconch. And so they theorized that he was using the top right mushroom to clear intestinal parasites, this birch polypore, and then the bottom right he was using to carry embers of a fire. So, he was found in the Swiss Alps. It's very cold. Fire is crucial for his survival. So this was the first tangible evidence that we see of humans using functional mushrooms for their health and survival. We get mushroom heads in Egypt. We get, some more petroglyphs in Siberia. We get these mushroom stones all around Central and South America, notably in Guatemala. And we even get the mushroom use in Greece. And the first written text that we see was by Hippocrates. He was writing about the agaricon mushroom as a cure-all. And over the next, couple thousand years, where it really was highlighted was in China. And so in 20 AD, we get mention of using fungi for supporting health and wellness in Materia Medicas. And we get reishi, porreococos, tremella, a lot of the mushrooms that we actually use at Mushroom Revival. They've been being talked about for over 2,000 years in written text. Now, over the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, researchers started isolating certain compounds, right, from these fungi. And so the most notable is Alexander Fleming's penicillin, right? And this is a drug that has saved hundreds of millions of people's lives and is pretty famous. We get LSD discovered in 1938. And on and on. Cyclosporin A was isolated from a fungi and used commercially in 1983. And if anyone has had an organ transplant, they're able to do that operation because of this cyclosporin A from this Tolypocladium inflatum. It suppresses your immune system enough so your body does not reject the new organ. And so we get a ton of these notable compounds being isolated. And then over, now from the last, I feel like 20, 30 years, functional mushrooms are really starting to blow up, right? Fast Company, Forbes, Whole Foods are talking about them. Celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Gwyneth Paltrow are talking about them and using them. And, it's really the shroom boom that's upon us, which is for good or, for worse. But the thing is that they're very popular. And so it's exciting to get a group of people all interested in it. And so we can talk about it and prevent any myths from being escalated and wrong information circulating in the industry. So, it sits in the supplement market, in the functional food and beverage market. And sales show that certain functional mushrooms are increasing up to 811%, right? So they're blowing up like crazy, and everyone is kind of jumping on it as a consumer or on the business end. So now's the time to learn about it, right? So this is kind of where I come in. My journey started in 2013, and, it started with this cup. It was my first semester of college. And so most people, when they think of first semester of college, they think of this cup full of beer or something else. For me, it was full of mushrooms. And long story short, I was offered a full solo cup of mushrooms. And, I didn't know how much of a typical dose was, but I, heard of mushrooms. I knew that they were safe. I knew that, I wasn't going to overdose. I knew that, I felt pretty comfortable, but I really didn't know what I was in for. And so I ate it on the spot. And to say the least, I had a totally ego shattering experience that totally changed the course of my life. I, up to then, was dealing with, clinical depression and clinical anxiety, and, using various substances like alcohol and various things to try to cope, and smoking cigarettes at the time. And just that dose of mushrooms, just that night experience, I was able to live a happier life and, go off my medication, stop smoking cigarettes, change my friend group, get really into healthy eating and yoga, and, on and on and on. So for me, it was this huge realization that mushrooms can not only save humanity, but the world. And no one's really talking about them, right? And so I bought every single book on Amazon. I, signed up for every single class I could. I got internships. I worked for free at my local mushroom farm. I did everything I could to learn about mushrooms. And I was going out in the woods every day, picking mushrooms, and I would fill up, the dining room table or my desk in college. And, my roommates at the time would, I would be, going as quickly as I could to ID them before my roommates would get mad at me because they were rotting away before I can ID them all. But something in me clicked, right? That mushrooms were it. And it was something that I really wanted to do. So this was my first internship at this company that was growing mycelium on grain of these functional mushroom species. And so I learned, about the industry on an industrial scale. How do these companies produce these things? How do you work in the lab? How do you work with strains and sterile techniques? And I was hooked. And then this journey brought me to Ecuador, right? Where I was studying different biodiversity of different ecosystems, and the anthropogenic effect on them. So that's just a long way of saying, studying life and how humans are kind of messing with it. And I was studying these ants called leafcutter ants or Atta ants. And for people that don't know, maybe they've seen videos of these ants carrying leaves in these lines. but they don't know that they're actually chewing these leaves up in their nest, making this big leaf pile and growing fungi on them. And so they're eating that fungi and using it as their sole food source. So they're actually sustainable mushroom farmers. And to take it one step further, they don't clear cut a tree. They don't take all the leaves from a tree. They only take a certain percentage and they move off onto the next tree. So the trees are staying vital and thriving. And so this is something that we could really learn. And they weren't using any plastic bags. They weren't using gasoline or petroleum to farm. They were just straight natural. So it's something that really inspired me of, okay, we can work with fungi and there's a way to do it very sustainably. And on the flip side, you know, I was deep in the Amazon rainforest, the most biodiverse region in the world, and saw this symbiotic relationship between insects and fungi. But on the flip side, there's these things called entomopathogenic fungi. So a lot of people call them cordyceps, or mushrooms that attack insects. And so it's right out of a sci-fi film, these mushrooms popping out of bugs. This was the first one I ever found on a weevil. And, you know, as a young boy, I mean, this is something that I blew my mind. I was totally fascinated by. It was literally right out of a sci-fi film. And right then it just captured me. I mean, these are the coolest, craziest organisms on the planet. And luckily, my teacher at the time was a professional photographer. So he captured these amazing images that are shown of these cordyceps in Ecuador. So they're, you know, attacking all these types of insects. They're mushrooms, all shapes and sizes. And it was just blowing my mind, literally, on how crazy these fungi were in these ecosystems. But, you know, I was having an amazing time, and this was over the course of a few months. And, you know, what really put the trip on hold, so to speak, or really inspired me was we were staying at this Yasuni research station in the most biodiverse region on the planet. And it was also home to a oil refinery. And so they were mining and refining oil. And the indigenous people there were totally displaced, and their way of life was totally affected. The cancer rates were much higher. And so I was able to interview, you know, from the kids to the parents to the grandparents of this tribe, you know, how is this affecting them? And on a walk one day, I found an unlined pit of oil. And I was probably 600 meters away, and I could smell it. It was just awful smell, and the color fumes, the rainbow fumes coming up, and all the plants around this pit of oil were just dead. And, you know, everything, all the birds around it were kind of giving sounds of alarm. And it hurt to see that. And it was blowing me away that humans could create this destruction in the most beautiful biodiverse places on the planet. And I was also reading at the same exact time that fungi had the ability to clean up oil spills. And so at that moment, it was like someone hitting me over the head. It was like, yeah, I need to study this more. And I want to partner with fungi to solve some of these, you know, huge problems that we're facing in this world. And so I went back, changed my major, wrote this book called the Remediation Handbook that, you know, we're offering for free. If anyone wants to read it, it's I think around 250 pages, if I can remember. I think 230 or 40. So if anyone wants the PDF, we'll give it to you for free. And, you know, it came full circle. I started growing mushrooms on cigarette butts, as, you know, mushrooms helped me stop smoking cigarettes. And now here I am degrading the toxins of cigarette butts. So it went totally full circle. And it really stuck with me. Okay, how can mushrooms save the planet? And so, I did this research. I got some grant money. I figured out that mushrooms can degrade these toxins to undetectable amounts, and figured out these crazy ideas of putting these fungal compounds in an airplane and spraying them over a brownfield site or a Superfund site. And this is an image of the mushrooms actually growing on a cake of cigarette butts, and was really excited. And then my life kind of went to a complete halt in the midst of it when I got bit by a tick. And for anyone who has lived in the Northeast or know anything about ticks, they carry something called Lyme disease. And so got that pretty hard. And my life went from, being energized and feeling really good to lethargic and, brain fog, painful joints. I was limping, around, and there's some days where I couldn't lift my arm, a couple inches because it hurt too much. My shoulder joint was totally inflamed. And so it totally threw a wrench in my life. And, from that period, I dedicated myself to living a healthier way of life. And, through that dedication and through my research, I found that functional mushrooms were supportive for overall health and wellness. And that's where really my journey of mushroom revival began, was, wanting to support my own health. And, if I could help other people, then that was 1,000 times better. And so functional mushrooms, I know I've been talking about a lot of topics. There is the narrow definition of, mushrooms for the health and wellness of the human body, but really through all these life experiences, I found that it goes beyond that. So yes, there's mushrooms that are great for the human body to support our immune systems, to support a sense of focus, energy, you name it. But there's also mushrooms that can clean up oil spills, right? We can replace styrofoam. We can make better alternatives to toxic things on our planet for the health of our earth, right? Mycorrhizal fungi can better the health of our soil, can capture carbon, etc. That technically, I think, is functional fungi, right? It serves a vital function for the health of our planet. And then for the mind or the spirit, psilocybin is getting all this research now that it can cure, PTSD or, depression, cluster headaches, all these different things. And so I think, fungi serve 3 roles, and these are our 3 homes, and we got to take care of them. And so during this time, and this was probably back in 2017, I found Cordyceps militaris in the US. This was when I came back from Ecuador, and I found this mushroom, and it was growing on a moth larva. And it was this orange Cheeto looking mushroom. And I was so excited about it. And based on my research, I knew that it can, support, this is probably 2016, support energy levels. And a lot of athletes were using them. And so, around the time, I was writing the Microremediation book, and I wanted to make my own humble grow and wanted to supply myself with these mushrooms, and started growing them in combination. This is cannabis in Massachusetts, where we're cycling CO2 and oxygen in this grow tent. I was growing hydroponic plants at the time. It was growing mushrooms in these grow houses to cycle oxygen and CO2, trying to mimic the biodiversity that I was seeing in these tropical rainforests, right? I was growing all these different mushrooms in symbiosis with plants, which, looking back, I was overcomplicating my life, and I just needed to focus on fungi, right? And that is where I could go far. And that's where I feel like it needed the most research. And so I started, really scrappy. I got this folding table for free. I jerry-rigged this flow hood, which, pumps sterile air through it so I can do lab work. And, I did it in my living room. And in the beginning of Mushroom Revival, it was really throwing the pieces I can get together and just doing it, right? And so for anyone who's interested in making their own mushroom business or mushroom farm or growing mushrooms, you don't even have to go this high tech, right? You can get a grow kit from online, or even go to a mushroom farm and ask them for one, and they might give you an old one that still produces mushrooms, and you could do it at home. And at the time, I, lived right down the street from my local university. It was actually sneaking in after hours so I can use their equipment and their facilities, just so I can grow mushrooms, right? Just so I can practice all day, every day. I had a crazy night shift that I would do just because I was obsessed with mushrooms, and I just needed to grow them and work with them and just work my way up to buying one piece of equipment at a time and slowly building, right? And so I was obsessed at the time with growing cordyceps. There's tons of farms around that grew shiitake and lion's mane and maitake and all these different mushrooms, but no one was growing cordyceps. We figured out how to grow it about 100 years ago here in the United States, but really, there were some closet grows of people growing it very low, small scale, but nothing really on a large scale. So that really inspired me to be able to supply the market and make products that really supported my life and my health. So I was trying all these different things, like growing in bags and trays. And I was doing this actually in my basement of the house that I was renting, and, had to carry these hot pressure cookers up 2 flights of stairs and, place them around the house so I wouldn't, flip the breakers. And, we made it work until, I started in the living room, and then it went to the dining room. And then it took over my room, and it took over the basement, the garage, until my roommates politely said, hey, have you thought about, finding another space that you can, grow this farm? And so I found this wonderful barn in Western Massachusetts that was, built by these Amish people. And it was a beautiful place, and it had plenty of parking. It was, beautiful. The people were nice. And it was where we really started Mushroom Revival and growing our cordyceps farm. And these racks were, we were so scrappy at the time that we just drilled these shoe racks to these planks of wood, and we drilled these wheels at the bottom. And, we just made it work. None of the equipment that we were using were meant for mushroom production. We just threw it together and we made it work. And it did. We had a couch. All of our furniture we got from, for free. And some of them had broken legs, and we shoved 2x4s underneath. Just at that time, we had to be scrappy, and we just wanted to grow mushrooms, and that's all we wanted to focus on. And so a lot of people call these Cheetos or alien Cheetos, and they're, beautiful mushrooms. And we're trying to figure out, how do we do this on a big scale, right? There were no methods really for large scale cordyceps production in the US. All the research and literature and production was done in China. And a lot of that information was just behind language barriers, or, I hadn't visited those farms yet, so I didn't see what they were doing on a large scale. And so I was the first person in the United States to grow in all these different containers, first person to grow in monotubs. And I had no idea, but there was this huge mushroom farm 6 minutes down the road that had this massive autoclave. And so this is a big container that sterilizes material, which is crucial for mushroom production. And so we rented it out on the weekends to grow our business. And so we scaled up dramatically over the weekend, and we got a little over our head and started growing in these bins. And we were duct taping them to make it airtight. But the duct tape that we got, we even got Gorilla Tape, but whatever happened, the moisture unstuck the tape and we got a lot of contamination. And so that method didn't really work. And so we went back to the tried and true method of jars. And, we knew how to do this. It just wasn't as scalable. And so, I was looking up wholesale how to get a ton of jars so we can grow these cordyceps. And so we made these little, aluminum boats that can carry 6 at a time. So it's easier. And we had volunteer parties where we had music blasting. And we basically filled these jars with rice and we put a nutrient media in, and we had these lids that we had to drill a hole in the middle of and poke it with stuffing of a pillow. And so I was buying these pillows wholesale so we could rip them open and stuff them in. At this time, it was, tens of thousands of these lids. And so I'd throw on these nature documentaries and, stuff these lids with pillow stuffing so the mushrooms could breathe. And we had a lot of fun. We worked so hard. We're working like 100-hour weeks at some weeks. At least I was trying to just grow these mushrooms and get them to the people. And yeah, we were doing it all. We were growing the mushrooms. We were, isolating strains. We were doing a lot of the sterile lab work and making the extracts in-house and just doing everything. So we had to wear a lot of hats and keep juggling everything, which was fun. But a good way to burn out as well. So, there's always that saying, keep it simple, stupid, which is very, very true. But we looked like the Ghostbusters squad, in these sterile suits, and we would inoculate these bins or jars with this mycelium or the roots of the mushroom. So the mycelium would grow out and then the mushrooms. And each batch was 5,100 jars. And because it was 6 minutes down the road, we had to rent a U-Haul and, transport these 5,100 mason jars, the 6 minutes up the road. And it was a dirt road, bumpy. And so sometimes we had people in the back, like making sure no jars would fall, and it would go at 1 mile per hour down this road to make sure that everything was okay. And that's how, we grew these cordyceps. It wasn't perfect, but we made it happen. As you can see, these racks have rubber bands around them because these jars would fall off and break. And we got so used to the sound of jars shattering on the ground that we wouldn't even flinch anymore. And so we had these rubber bands around them so they would kind of bounce back. But in this picture, there's probably over 15,000 jars of cordyceps growing. And we were not only the biggest cordyceps farm in the Americas, and in, the Western world, however you define that, but also the first USDA certified organic Cordyceps militaris mushroom farm in the Americas, and in this half of the globe. So we were pioneering Cordyceps militaris, and we were the first in 20 odd different things for this. And this was our bread and butter. This is, what we excelled in and what we loved. And we spent many thousands and thousands of hours studying these organisms and growing them and forming a good relationship with them. And it really, looked like a spaceship in our grow room. We had these cannabis lights, which were red, blue, and white, which all together formed this pink light. And it was really cool to step in. We had to keep it around a temperature of 65 to 68 degrees. And so it was pretty cold in there. And so when we opened the door, we get this blast of cold air and this pink light, and the AC units would have this cool buzz, and it was pretty cool to walk in there. You felt like an alien in your spaceship. And so these are what the Cordyceps militaris looked like when they were growing up. But we made a mistake. So we were cranking out. We were doing so many batches. We were doing tens of thousands of these jars. But we ran into a problem when the first batch was ready to harvest, when we realized that, narrow mouth mason jars were probably about a third of the price as wide mouth. And so when you're buying tens of thousands of them, a third of the price is very attractive. And I didn't realize until we went to harvest that that was the wrong decision, because we would try to stick our hand in there to harvest and our hand would get stuck. And so we would have to get this knife and try to cut the cake in half to shimmy each piece out, but a metal knife would break the glass. And so we had to use these food safe plastic knives to cut them in half and kind of shimmy them out. So they took a lot longer in harvest than we originally planned, but they worked out, and we harvested them all, and it ended up working. So this is me holding half of the cake that we ended up shimmying out. So based on that experience, we had to figure out a better method to cultivate these on a bigger scale that didn't utilize so much human power. And we wanted to share it with the world, right? So Lyra is my partner. We co-host the Mushroom Podcast together. If anyone hasn't listened to that, definitely tune in. We're on all major streaming platforms. But she was our lab manager and helped create this method to grow cordyceps on a large scale called the dumpling method. And we recorded it, and it's on YouTube. It's free. And we had the option to patent it, or keep it proprietary. But the way we, were thinking about it was, the industry is not going to get anywhere if we keep it behind closed doors. It is such a new industry that we need to open source it, or else no one will get anywhere. I mean, we can't do everything. So we decided to record it and offer it on YouTube for free so we can have more growers in the US. China at this point grows 90% of the world's mushrooms. And so here in the United States, we're so far behind. And so the intention for us releasing it was to make more US farms. We want more people growing cordyceps to supply our raging demand right now. So more farmers, more organic farmers, more mushroom people, the better. And so this is kind of a sneak peek of the video and some of our harvests. You can see I'm super excited to be holding this amount of cordyceps in my hands. After many failed attempts, we probably had the same statistics as the light bulb creation. Probably 1,000 was or 10,000 was our magic number. So we know a lot of ways not to grow mushrooms. This is a cool method that they grow cordyceps in China, where they actually defy gravity. So the substrate or the food for the mushrooms are right in the middle, and mushrooms grow up, and also they grow down. And so this is really creative and something that really inspired me with growing mushrooms. And we actually tried it. We're able to do one bin successfully, and then we called it quits because it was so complicated. But you can see many different ways to grow cordyceps. And the scale, we were growing thousands of dried pounds. The mushroom farms in China are growing, thousands of millions of dried pounds of Cordyceps militaris. So they're at like 1,000x scale a 1,000,000x scale of what we were at. And we were the biggest farm in this half of the globe. So, just to put that in perspective, they're thousands of years ahead of us in terms of technology and research and things like that. So that's Cordyceps militaris. Little rundown, our history with it. Most people know it as a functional mushroom to support our energy levels. A lot of athletes will use it. Supports lung health, cardiovascular health, liver health, supports kidney health, et cetera, et cetera. The thing, most Americans start their day with a cup of coffee, or maybe a couple or a few. And what coffee does is it actually suffocates our brain, and our body produces all these endorphins to help us stay alert and awake, right? It's a fight or flight response. And, eventually, after many hours of that, our body is exhausted and our adrenals are just shot and we crash, right? And so everyone knows that afternoon crash after your morning cup of coffee where you just feel exhausted. And so long-term, coffee actually does the opposite of what you want. And so cordyceps, why I love it is that it works with natural systems in our body called our ATP process. So adenosine triphosphate, the compounds in cordyceps, specifically cordycepin and adenosine, work in our body in that adenosine triphosphate process, which is food for mitochondria, right? And mitochondria is the powerhouse of our cells. So literally, it's natural energy on the cellular level without any jitters, without any crash. And so it's building, it's a tonic, it's supposed to be used on a daily basis, and it's actually building over time, as opposed to coffee, it's diminishing over time. So I know I still drink coffee on a morning basis, but I don't drink that much, right? I love the taste of it. And instead, I supplement with more cordyceps. And so I don't get that crash, and I can actually build my energy over time. Another mushroom to focus on is reishi, and the Latin name is either Ganoderma lucidum or Ganoderma lingere. It's called the queen of mushrooms or mushroom of immortality, the 10,000-year mushroom. It's a beautiful mushroom. In this picture, they have an antler structure, so these long kind of antlers with these fans on top. And they could just grow as this fan structure. They can just grow as antlers. And some people grow them almost like a bonsai tree, where they grow these beautiful different structures, put it in a beautiful vase, and display it at the front of their home when people walk in, because these structures are so beautiful. And most people know this, all functional mushrooms have these class of compounds called 1,3,1,6 beta glucans. And they're a class of compounds that help support our immune systems. And so reishi is chock full of them. Reishi also has these class of compounds called triterpenes, specifically ganoduric acids, A through D, which help support our body's natural inflammatory response post-workout or other like activity. And what reishi is really known for, apart from supporting, our cardiovascular health, brain health, liver, kidney health, is a sense of supporting a sense of calm, right? Supporting our body's natural ability to transition to a good night's rest, right? So most people have reishi, or, people would have reishi on their bedside table, right? And I always recommend that. I have reishi, a couple bottles right next to my bed, because, if I wake up in the middle of the night or right before I'm transitioning, it's perfect to just get me in that mode to drift into dream world. Lion's mane, the brain mushroom. This is lion's mane growing. It resembles the mane of a mushroom, almost looks like icicles coming down. And it is really famous for a class of compounds called hericenones, but it has about a dozen more that I'll get into that help support cognitive function, right? They help support memory, and, mental clarity, focus. And so we have a whole blend of this, as well as cordyceps and reishi, as well as we work with 10 different mushrooms total. But this is one of my favorites of all time. It's also delicious if you eat it. Chaga, it grows on birch trees. So it has this, this melanin outer shell, and it looks like almost burnt charcoal growing off the side of a birch tree. And it's not technically a mushroom. So this is the correct scientific term is a canker or a conch. But a lot of people just refer to it as a mushroom for colloquial ease of communication. But technically it is a canker. And this is people in Finland have used this fungus in a tea to replace coffee. A lot of people will even cut their coffee in half and put chaga tea in it because it tastes so good. It's so earthy, and really creamy. It has a really amazing taste, and it's chock full of these 1,3,1,6 beta glucans and a lot of compounds that support our immune health. And all functional mushrooms are adaptogens. So adaptogens support our body's natural ability to deal with occasional stress and fatigue. And I like to think of them as our own personal Zen monk, best friend that always just is with us at all times. So when life gets a little hectic, they remind us to stay in homeostasis and a sense of peace and calm, and ease, kind of the middle way, which is really cool to have those allies working with you 24/7. Because I know I, for one, have a go life, and I know many people do. So just work with those allies to keep a clear head is super important. Shiitake, really well known as a gourmet mushroom to eat, but it is chock full of these, 1,3,1,6 beta glucan, specifically lentinin, which is world famous for supporting immune health and also supporting liver function. On the right, we can see the gill of a shiitake mushroom under an electron microscope, which was super cool. Lear and I actually went to a lab for a date, and we got to see these mushrooms underneath an electron microscope, and they're so cool. I would never imagine the structure of a mushroom gill looking like this. So really amazing. Maitake, also, roughly translated to the dancing mushroom in Japanese. And this is amazing, also gourmet mushroom. And it's the compounds most famous in this mushroom is called MD fraction. And it's a 1,3,1,6 beta glucan, which is incredible for supporting immune health and liver and kidney function. Beautiful, beautiful mushroom. Turkey tail is one that I love the look of. Turkey tail. Every single mushroom is very different. So it has these bands of different colors on them, and they're a little fuzzy on top. And so it's cool when you find them in the wild. They always look just a tiny bit different, and they all have their different display of colors. And, I guess some people thought they looked like the tails of a turkey, which is given the common name. But the classes of compounds most notably known in these are PSK and PSP, which are world famous for supporting the immune system, and also gut health. Porreacocos, another one that's not technically a mushroom. It's technically the correct scientific term is a sclerotia, and you could think of it like a yam. It kind of looks like rocks, but when they're all polished up and they don't have dirt on them, they do they look like yams, and sometimes they grow in a kind of a cylinder shape. So they do almost look like a big sweet potato. And, most notably, this is known for supporting our mood. It's also great for cognitive support, for immune support. It's a great adaptogen, and overall an awesome fungus that it's not as popular here in the US, but, hopefully in a few years, this will be commonplace. Mishima, very famous in Japan, roughly translated to women's island. And it's most condensed on a specific island, which is called Women's Island, roughly. And it has a high density of mulberry trees, which this Mishima grows on. So Phelinus lentius is known for supporting women's health, all around immune health. And, it's a great adaptogen as well. Tremella, you can see this mushroom in so many skincare. So interesting. If you use any skincare products, I would look at the back of the label to see if you will see this mushroom, because it pops up all over the place. Even if on the front of the label, they don't say, includes mushrooms. This is just such an amazing mushroom for supporting, skin health and moisture levels and hydration. It can hold up to 500 times its weight in water. So really hydrating, really great for the skin, and also your brain. Really great for supporting cognitive function, memory, focus, etc. And super nourishing, really amazing mushroom. So talked about this, and I can see, I get skeptics all the time of, is this legit? They look at herbal products or, functional mushrooms, and they kind of roll their eyes, right? Is it legit? Well, functional mushrooms have been used for over 5,000 years and maybe millions, right? If we take into account those theories of coevolution with fungi. And if we count psilocybin, then yeah, maybe a lot longer than 5,000 years. But, there's been cultures that have used a bunch of weird stuff for thousands of years or believed a bunch of crazy stuff for thousands of years. That doesn't really say it's legit. That just shows that it's pretty much safe. That we've been using it for a while. It's not new, right? But there's over 600 clinical papers on functional mushrooms, and over 40 are featured on the NIH website. And these are not little clinical studies. These are some of the human clinical trials have up to 68,000 people involved in one single study. So it's not two people. It's tens of thousands of people participating. And functional mushrooms have over 130 functional benefits. So they've been studied for a while and in large numbers. So to really understand functional mushrooms, we talked about the history, the evolution. Now let's look at a typical mushroom and the life cycle. And this will be very relevant for the next section, which is talking about, busting myths in the industry. So a mushroom, has either pores or gills at the bottom, typically with, the exception of, Cordyceps or Chaga, Poriococcus, etc. But typically they have these pores or gills at the bottom, which shoot spores out. You can think of them like seeds, and the spores grow into these hyphal structures, almost like these spider webs underneath the soil or in a rotting log. They meet together and they form this mycelium, a little bit thicker of a web, and that's the root structure of a mushroom. And so their role is to spread out and digest food, right? And so when they're ready to spread their DNA, they make a mushroom, which is the fruiting structure. You can think of it like, within a fruit tree. The main structure is the tree, but when they're ready to disperse their DNA, they make fruits, right? And so that's what animals eat. That's what has, nutritional benefits and etc. So a lot of, over thousands of years, people have used the actual mushroom. If they're, working in traditional Chinese herbalism or anything, they're eating or using the mushrooms in stews and soups and teas, etc. But it's very new for researchers and companies to use something called mycelium on grain. And so a lot of companies out there will grow the roots of the mushroom in a sterile lab on a filler media like rice or oats, and they'll dehydrate it and blend it up into a powder, and they'll sell it as mushrooms. Now, right off the bat, the problem is that they're actually not mushrooms, right? It's like if you have an apple pie business, but you just grow the apple trees and you chop up the roots and the twigs and the bark, and maybe 80 to 90% is actually the soil in which the tree is growing in, and there's no apples, and you put it in a pie crust and you sell it as apple pies made with real apples. Doesn't really fly, and I feel like those apple pie consumers would be a little bit perplexed. So there is a method where companies can grow pure mycelium without that, rice or oat fillers, which take up about 80-90% of the final product. And so there is a way to grow pure mycelium. But, companies here in the US, I'm starting to see a couple starting to grow pure mycelium, but mostly what you're seeing in the US is this mycelium on grain. So it's about 80 to 90% rice powder or oat powder. And the FDA has been, has written documentation against, the labeling of products calling mycelium mushrooms, right? And so they say, since 1976, the FDA says you cannot, if you have mycelium as your product, you cannot label it mushrooms. And unfortunately, not all companies follow this ruling. and the FDA does not have all the resources to, reprimand all these companies or take corrective action. And so we get all these claims all over the place, especially with this shroom boom, right? There's companies that want to make a quick buck, and they see mushrooms are hot right now. And from a cultivation perspective, the reason why companies would want to use mycelium on grain is they're skipping the part where the mushrooms grow. And so you can grow that mycelium or the roots of the mushroom in probably 2 weeks, give or take. But the mushrooms, sometimes they take months to grow. And so from a business perspective, you're saving months on your timeline. You're getting more biomass. It's a lot cheaper to grow that. You don't have to have dedicated grow rooms, et cetera, et cetera. More profit in their pocket at the end of the day. And it's a lot easier. So, these companies are saying organic mushrooms, blah, 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 but hidden in the other ingredients or, in very small letters, does it say, myceliated brown rice or mycelial biomass? And so really it's a lawsuit waiting to happen, unfortunately, of, improper labeling and false advertising, which I would hate to see in this industry. And it's something that, because it's a shroom boom right now, we have to be educated. So we're getting what we're expecting to get, which is actual mushrooms, right? And another clever, phrase that people will probably throw out there, you'll probably see, is full spectrum, right? And this is on the curtails or on the tails of the cannabis industry, where full spectrum meant really good, right? You're getting all the compounds, but in this case, these companies are using it as they're saying they have mycelium, they have also fruiting bodies in there, and it's a blend of both. Now, working at some of these companies, seeing them up close, interviewing them, etc., I can tell you that there's no mushrooms in them. And actually, there's something called Primordia. So in this bag, you could probably see these little white dots. And, they're kind of hard to tell. And if you can't see them, don't worry about it. You could probably see these little white dots at the bottom here. And those are called primordia. And what happens is when the mycelium or the roots of the mushrooms start tangling up to begin to want to form a mushroom fruiting body, these companies will say that those little bumps are a mushroom, which they're not. It's just clever wording, and the average consumer won't really know the difference. So is it really full spectrum or clever wording? It's really the latter. But even if they grew out the mushrooms, right, to full potential, they were, full grown mushrooms, you're still getting all the grain fillers, you're still getting the oats. But say a company has pure mycelium and the fruiting body, right? That sounds great, but it's like if anyone has a medical marijuana card, it's like going to a dispensary and they throw in a bunch of sticks and stems, and then there's a couple nugs in there, and they said, "Oh no, this is full spectrum," right? You get pretty mad that you're paying top dollar for this. And it's the same way in the functional mushroom space. It's, these stems, these sticks, the mycelium have significantly lower levels of these functional compounds that you're looking for. And, dietary supplements are not cheap, right? And if you're paying this much money for it, you want to make sure that you're getting all the good benefits that you're getting. And I'll get into more in a second. So, extraction. So a lot of companies, to make matters worse, is that they don't actually extract the biomass, right? And this could be both if they're using mushrooms or not, right? And so if for certain they're using mushrooms, that's not the end of the road, right? For quality. Another piece of information you need is right extraction, right? So mushrooms are made out of chitin, which is the same material as shrimp shell or lobster shell. And so our bodies have a hard time, getting all the beneficial compounds out of that biomass, it's very hard for our bodies to digest that. And so it's crucial to extract. And so there are polar compounds and non-polar compounds, basically, compounds that you can get from water and some from, say, alcohol. And so you need to use both. And so that's why at Mushroom Revival, we use tinctures, is to make sure that your body, can digest those compounds, and it's bioavailable for the body, all those compounds that you're wanting. And you're not putting your body through extra work to try to digest it itself, which, a lot of times you'll just excrete it at the end of the day, and you're not getting, all the beneficial compounds. This is a study from Bastyr University that showed just a hot water extraction, just making a tea, was exponential for the benefits of, supporting the immune system for, both reishi and turkey tail. And this is without doing an alcohol extraction. So you can see just half of the extraction you need does wonders, for the beneficial compounds. So let's kind of look at both. What's a comparison of, real actual mushrooms versus this Mycelium on grain? You can see just right off the bat how different looking they are. So the one on the left is this Mycelium on grain. It's this white fluffy material. The one on the right is a bright orange, right? It has these crazy Cheeto looking mushrooms. It's significantly different. And you can do a really easy test at home. If you don't know, if you buy a product and you're looking at the label and you have no idea, did they put fillers in it? Is it really legit? You can do a simple test by getting an iodine tincture. And so this is what we did in this simple test. On the far left, we have the cordyceps that we grew. Right off the bat, it's super vibrant orange, right? And the two in the middle are just some quote unquote cordyceps that we pulled off the shelf at Whole Foods. And on the right, we have, just pure rice, same amount of milligrams, same amount of milliliters. And so we're about to drop iodine tincture into here. So what iodine does is it reacts with starch and turns the liquid a deep purple. So if it has any starch fillers, it will turn the liquid a deep purple. So let's see what happens. Yeah. So most of the stuff that you see on the shelf is full of fillers and fluff and just starchy ingredients that you don't need, you don't want, and it's just kind of a waste of money. So this is something really crucial as the mushroom industry is blowing up, is that we really need to be careful. And as conscious consumers, right, we should be putting our money where our mouth is and, getting what is the best for our bodies. So we partnered with Bastyr University for a couple years in a row to study our cordyceps and the difference between Mycelium and these fruiting bodies. And this is Reishi Strauss, and she was spearheading this research at Bastyr. And so we're looking at the main functional compounds in cordyceps and what are the difference in the actual mushrooms versus the Mycelium. And we found that actual mushrooms have 51.5 times more cordycepin and over 7 times more adenosine than the Mycelium or Mycelium on grain. And so it's huge. It's not like a 10% difference. It's 51 times different, right? So it's huge. And then, this is another study that found that, fruiting bodies cultivated in a lab were actually higher than wild strains that were found in the wild, and also pure Mycelium grown in a bioreactor. So we also know that, the fruiting bodies have higher levels of compounds than pure Mycelium without the grain, and also wild specimens. So then to take it a step further, if anyone remembers these 1316 beta glucans that I was talking about earlier to support our immune health, we found that our cordyceps actual mushrooms had up to 400 times more of these compounds than Mycelium on grain products that we're pulling right off the shelf at Whole Foods that we're testing. 400 times, not percent, times more 1316 beta glucan. So it's not a small, difference. It's massive. So that's Cordyceps. There's other studies that show up to 13 times more amino acids. And this is another study that showed that there's some products on the market that have, that are even less potent in these 1316 beta glucans than, the media that they're grown on. So there's a potential that they're actually worse than just eating sorghum straight up. That's not all the time, but this is one case in which that happened. So another thing, kind of a misconception in the industry, is that some companies will put a polysaccharide amount on the label. And so they'll say, we have 550 milligrams of these polysaccharides. And that sounds incredible, right? That sounds amazing. That's a big word. It sounds like it's good for me. Polysaccharides, if you ever taken chemistry or know what they are, they're just long sugar chains, right? And so starch is a polysaccharide, and there's a bunch of polysaccharides in rice or sorghum or oats. And so that's basically saying we have a bunch of starchy fillers in our product. Now, 1316 beta glucans are a polysaccharide, but just saying polysaccharides is way too vague, right? These fillers could bump that number up, and so it's not a good metric to go on. And even beta glucans, I've seen some companies just say beta glucans, but they don't specify what kind of beta glucans. So the ones that I'm talking about are 1316 beta glucans, and they're fungal based, and there's over 6,000 publications that show that they support the immune system. And then there's another class of beta glucans called 1314, and those are from cereal grains. And so you can get them in oats. They do not support the immune system, but they might have an effect on your cholesterol, supporting cholesterol levels in normal ranges. But you need a lot of them. And so it's better off that you buy oatmeal, right? You can get 25 pounds of oatmeal for around the same price as, probably 100 grams of this mycelium on oats. And, I've heard a lot of other companies that they claim this compound in the bottom right. And, that's actually from these oats or these grains. And it's not actually from the mushrooms or the mycelium. And again, you need a lot of those, and it's better off that you just eat a bowl of oatmeal every once in a while, to get these benefits. And so let's move on to reishi. So we're talking about cordyceps. And so let's talk about reishi. And so, studies have shown that the actual mushrooms of reishi have up to 28 times more 1316 beta glucans for immune support. There's also, these class of triterpenes that I was talking about, these ganoduric acids A through D, which are extensively studied for, supporting our body's natural inflammatory response post-workout, or helping support our body in seasonal transitions, helping, support our body as an adaptogen, right? Helping our body maintain a level of homeostasis. They were non-detectable in the mycelium, right? So mycelium did not have these famous compounds in them, where the actual mushroom had high levels of these compounds. So that right there should tell you, I definitely need the mushroom, because there's not even these famous compounds in the mycelium. Ergosterol, in reishi was a lot higher in the mushroom, significantly a lot higher in the mushroom compared to the mycelium. And one study was performed by the USP, which set standards for pharmaceuticals, food ingredients, dietary supplements. They found that 68% of tested reishi products on the market were absent of the fruiting bodies. So up to, 2/3 of products on the market were fluff and false advertised, and not what they said they were. And so that's very scary, and it's something that as this industry is just going further and further, and we're getting new mushroom companies popping up every single day, this should scare people to, only get it from, reputable sources to, make sure your dollar's going a long way. Now let's go, I love to play devil's advocate and go on the other side. So there's two compounds that are actually higher in the mycelium than the fruiting bodies, and that's Gaba and Lovastatin. And Gaba, a little higher in the mycelium, but, you're getting 113 milligrams per kilogram, but the recommended daily amount is 100 to 300 milligrams a day to help with mood. So just right off the bat, you need a kilogram, 1,000 grams of pure reishi mycelium to get the minimum daily amount of GABA. And so, 100 grams of mycelium on grain, which is diluted, 80% with fillers, that's about, I don't know, 30, $35. And so times that by 10, it's not practical. So Lovastatin, it's, a lot higher in the mycelium, and it's something that you might be able to get the recommended daily amount in a day, and it helps support cholesterol levels in healthy ranges. But there's over 800 scientific studies that show that Lovastatin could be harmful in these high amounts and not really recommended. So that obviously deserves more study. But these compounds are a lot higher, but do they make sense? Maitake, the dancing mushroom, Grifola frondosa, there are these three compounds that are in the fruiting body that are not in the mycelium, and they're vital for vital protein health and cell health and signaling. And Maitake has much higher levels of trehalose and nucleotides, MD fraction, up to 9 times of these, more of these 1,3,1,6 beta glucans for immune health. Shiitake shows that all the amino acids, protein, glycogen, lipids, absorbic acid, ash content, increased as fruiting bodies developed and increased as the fruiting bodies got more mature. So this goes back to the full spectrum conversation where, the bigger the mushrooms, the more developed, the more compounds are going to be in them. And so the Primordia is just thrown right out. And we also see that Shiitake have up to 4 times more 1,3,1,6 beta glucans than the mycelium. Chaga, there are up to more than 14 compounds in the sterile conch that are not in the mycelium. And these are the most famous compounds. This is what Chaga is known for. And they're just not in the mycelium. And so that, again, right off the bat, just shows that you need the sterile conch, you need the Chaga, and you cannot be getting mycelium, or you're not getting what you're searching for, right? You're not getting those main functional compounds. And there's up to 7 times more of these 1,3,1,6 beta glucans for immune support. Wolfiporia cocos, there's 91 triterpene acids in the sclerotia, but only 19 triterpene acids in the mycelium. And those, it's up to 6 times higher in the sclerotium compared to the mycelium, those 19 that they share. So overall, the sclerotia has, a significant higher levels of these compounds. There are 4 that I will bring up because I love to play devil's advocate, to be fair, is that there are 2 compounds that are about the same in the sclerotia and the mycelium, and 2 compounds that are a bit higher in the mycelium, but not by much. And if you take in account that, most products, this is pure mycelium. So if you take in account that most products on the market are diluted 80% with rice or oats, then the sclerotia then has higher levels of these compounds, right? And so again, I put in I fold the page down here to maybe there's some potential research for these 2 compounds or these 4 compounds. But again, it's pretty night and day comparison. There has been some debate with lion's mane. And again, I would love to play devil's advocate that Mycelium has erinacines where the fruiting body does not. And, it also has a couple compounds that have no scientific literature on it. And, the fruiting body actually has significantly more compounds to support brain health than the mycelium. And so it has hericenones, it has DLPE, amylobin, amicenone, hericinin, erinacerin, and so a lot more compounds to support cognitive function and memory, focus, etc., and up to 29 times more 1,3,1,6 beta glucans for immune health. So right then and there, it's pretty night and day. I do think that maybe there's potential for isolating pure erinacine A from mycelium. But at this point, there's no way to do that organically. And so all the practices now are GMO and pumped full of chemicals. And so there's no real sustainable, eco-friendly, high-quality way to do that. So moving on to psilocybe or psilocybin containing mushrooms. So, this is, I think, part of that functional mushroom space where, there are conflicting information out there. And as more people are using mushrooms for microdosing and XYZ, I've always been taught that the cap has a lot more higher levels of these tryptamine compounds than the stem. And a couple studies show that, right? That the cap has higher levels. But in a recent event, a psilocybin cup in 2021, they showed the opposite. So I think this needs more study. Also, these beta carbolines, which are MAOI compounds, so they help enhance the overall psychedelic experience. They're up to 100 times higher in the very tips of the mycelium. And also in truffles and sclerotia. So I think this also has implications for further study. But as we interviewed Dennis McKenna, and he said, if you're not feeling it or you would like to feel it more, just eat more, and I don't think that we need to go this complex with it, but potentially maybe as the industry grows. And potentially there might be a new method of cultivation. So now we're going through this process of producing these mushrooms, which have psilocybin or psilocin in them, but we can genetically modify baker's yeast or E. coli to produce much higher levels of these main compounds for a fraction of the price and time, etc. But as we're learning in cannabis, is an entourage effect, all these different compounds together. So, I think this deserves more research. And this is something, psilocybin had a bad rep in the 60s. A lot of people think of these mushrooms as super hippy dippy and it's counterculture. It's not to be taken seriously. You'll trip out and see all these flashing colors and things like that. But what is really interesting is now that we're turning into science, which legitimizes these mushrooms. And we're finding all this new research for treating OCD, PTSD, cluster headaches, etc. And we're seeing more and more cities decriminalize and even Oregon legalizing for medicinal use. So we're seeing it totally disrupting the pharmaceutical industry, which is, I think, going to be huge. And Mycelium, discovered 40 new compounds in these psilocybe mushrooms. So I think we're just breaking the surface of what these mushrooms can do. And we're starting to see new companies that you can test it at home, right? The good thing about mushrooms is that, there isn't really cases of people dosing them with harmful chemicals. You're not going to get the wrong thing. It might happen every once in a blue moon, but really you can see that they're mushrooms. It's not like this colorless, odorless compound chemical. It's something that you can see the mushrooms. But this is at-home test kits that people can use to test the potency of mushrooms. And we're going to get to a level of the functional mushroom industry where craft beer or craft cannabis or like industries are, where, in China, there were companies that had, this strain is for tea because it's a lot sweeter. And this Cordyceps is for stir fries, and this is higher in selenium, this is higher in iron, etc. And almost like a supplement, and almost, these different strains had different abilities and benefits. And so we're all about full transparency here at Mushroom Revival, and we really pioneered the use of QR codes for seeing full test results. Something that really frustrated me was this secrecy and a lot of bad practice in the industry of these companies getting away with all these really not so good practices, and then, hiding behind really good marketing copy and, not being fully transparent really, and like lying to people. And so I wanted to be different with our company and be fully transparent, right? And so we have the QR codes. You can see exactly what's inside of our products, and you can see, if we ever put fillers in, you can see it on the lab test. We can't hide from it. So it pushes us to make better and better products every single round. We are, because we're fully transparent, we need to make the best, the most potent products because it is fully transparent. You can see it and you can compare it. So it forces us to make the best products for you guys. And it's something that it's cool. It's cool to have that fire under our butt to make some really cool stuff. And it's something that I think we need as an industry. We need full transparency of lab tests. We need, it would be cool. I think in the future, we're going to have either an app on our phone or a handheld device that we can scan everything in a grocery store to see, it'd be cool to go in the vegetable aisle and scan what's the most nutrient dense carrot for me, and buy that produce. And then store to store, farmer to farmer, see what is the best fresh produce, and even in the supplement aisle to be able to scan it. And another topic that I want to talk about is, is it the mushroom you say it is? So we talked about, is it a mushroom versus Mycelium on grain, but there's also the cases of people using the wrong species of mushrooms. And so if they're new to the industry or working with a non-reputable forager or farmer, or they themselves are going out and foraging and they falsely ID the wrong mushroom or working, etc. There are tons of types of reishi or Ganoderma species out there. And, I see so many companies using a different species of Ganoderma and calling it reishi, or even Cordyceps using a totally different species and calling it Cordyceps militaris or something else, or even lion's mane. There's a really famous company out there that is using something that's not lion's mane, a totally different, species of mushroom, and calling it lion's mane. And we see this with turkey tail. As I was talking about, there's a lot of false turkey tails that look like turkey tail, but are not actually turkey tail. And same with chaga. You can misidentify that all the time. And so this is also something that, with those QR codes, like they should have DNA authentication to make sure that it's the mushroom you say it is. So myth number one, mycelium is better than fruiting bodies or more potent. That's pretty much busted. I gave a couple scenarios where the mycelium had, a little bit higher levels of compounds, but pretty much busted it right away as well. Full spectrum, we went over that. That's kind of busted. You can't separate mycelium from grain. I've heard a lot of companies say that. That's pretty busted. Polysaccharides as a method of testing potency, that is also busted. You should use 1,3,1,6 beta glucans. And if you're curious about this, we actually, interviewed the scientist who has his PhD in studying starches and these 1,3,1,6 beta glucans and how to test them, Barry McCleary, on our podcast. If you want to hear the interview, there was talk about this test not working, and he was breaking it down on the legitimacy of this test. This is also a topic I hear a lot. There's a lot of people out there. I don't know where this rumor started, but people thinking that they need 1 gram a day. And, all the scientific literature out there, it ranges from, 200 milligrams to up to 9 grams. So the range is pretty significant, and every body is different, right? Everyone is using these supplements for different things. We have a standard suggested use, but, it's up to you. You can't overdose on these functional mushrooms. So really finding out a dose that works with you based on your specific body type is, I think, really important. And just starting out with our suggested use. And if it's too little or too much, then, cut back or add more. Our president, Carrie Lum Dewey, a full dropper of our reishi is too much for her. She passes out right away and it's too strong. So she has to do a couple drops, right? And so every person is different, and just finding the right dose for you is really important. So regardless of political leanings, it's pretty transparent. Trump did not like China. And there is this touchy topic that, anything coming from China is bad, and this might make, a few people listening feel a little bit uncomfortable, but, take a deep breath and bear with me for just 1 second. It's most of our mushroom culture, most of our mushroom science is coming from China, if not from Japan and a lot of these Asian countries. And so we have a lot to learn in the United States when it comes to mushrooms, and when it comes to functional mushrooms specifically. If you remember the history of functional mushrooms, for thousands of years, we have written literature and science in China, where here in the US, we're just starting, right? And so 80 to 90% of the world's mushrooms are grown in China. And so to rule out, China, anything from China is bad, can really hinder our growth as mushroom lovers, right? Because we have a lot to learn from China, especially when it comes to mushrooms. And really, it is a bit racist to be, anti-Asian, right? There might be talks of, I want to support local people, which is one thing, but anything coming from, any Asian country or China is problematic. And we saw it, interface when COVID came around, is that it is really detrimental for these communities. And if we are going to excel as a global population, if we're going to excel as a global, mushroom community, we can't have this in our space, and it's just going to hinder our growth. So this is also a little controversial, and I wanted to bring it up because I like to look at the industry in all these different perspectives and break down maybe some myths or misconceptions, or, just talk about it, because when you go into mushrooms, it is infinitely deep. So what is considered local, right? There's a definition, it's 400 miles. So to put that in perspective, it's San Francisco to LA is about, 382 miles, just under, local, which is pretty big. California is pretty big, but also it's pretty small. The distance from LA to Maine is 3,250 miles, where, Maine to Spain or Portugal, sorry, Massachusetts to Portugal is actually a smaller distance. So is crossing the North Atlantic Ocean more local than LA to Maine? You know, some people have the definition of it has to be in the United States to call it local, right? Where, you know, I'm in Austin, Texas right now, and Mexico is not too far away, or Cuba, or, you know, these other countries, and people in Washington, you know, Canada is not too far away. And this obviously, this is from a United States perspective, very different. I know we have people tuning in from, you know, Italy and Australia and probably elsewhere, so this might not be relevant. But from a United States perspective, you know, it gets complicated pretty quick. But from a global perspective, pretty soon, when we're going to start jumping to other planets, we're going to have a funny, you know, part of our communication of calling it, hey, was it produced on planet Earth? You know, and that's considered local. You know, is it local to our home planet? And that's a reality pretty soon. And so how ethical is shipping overseas? You know, I've heard a lot of people say, you know, don't get anything from China because it's very detrimental to the environment. And for a while, you know, actually when making this presentation, I had that thought, right? And for most of my life, it was, yeah, that's super detrimental. Until I was preparing for this presentation, I looked up the numbers. A typical, you know, boat, or the distance from Shanghai to San Francisco is just under 10,000 kilometers. A DEFRA study concluded that, you know, a 4,000 pound freight carried for just that, you know, distance emitted 661 pounds of CO2, which is a measure of global warming potential. So if by a plane, that jumps 44x, which shows that definitely if you're shipping things overseas, to go by a boat. And I am going a little bit longer because this is just, it's something that I'm passionate about, and I'm, you know, hopefully you guys can stay, but we are recording this. So if you can't stay the whole time, I know we started late, but, you know, we will send the recording out afterwards if you want to catch the tail end, but I would love it if you would stay and geek out with me. So a comparison, if we shipped, you know, from Shanghai to San Francisco, it's about 661 pounds of CO2. If we were to take that round trip, so say we're a LA-based company and there's a mushroom farm in San Francisco. Say we were to drive to San Francisco to pick up our mushrooms and then drive back to LA to sell it at our farmer's market. We put local, you know, local from a local mushroom farm. You know, it would actually create more pounds of CO2 in that round car trip. And that's calculating the average CO2 emissions for the average US vehicle. Surprisingly, I mean, when I was doing these numbers, that blew my mind when I was seeing this. And so this isn't completely to say that, yeah, we should ship everything from China. This is to say, you know, both options can emit a significant amount of CO2, and what can we do to counteract that, right? And so how do we counteract? Whatever we do, you know, whether we're shipping it halfway across the world or staying local, you know, we're still contributing a significant amount of CO2 emissions. And this was a funny tweet that I laughed at, you know, Elon Musk offering 100 million towards the best carbon capture technology, which is all around us, right? And so I calculated, you know, based on the average mature tree, how do you counteract that 661 pounds of CO2? And you only need 14 trees, right? So it's not that crazy. And so a 4,000 pound shipment from, you know, all the way from China, it's, you know, you only need 14 trees to counteract that in 1 year, which is not that much, to be honest. And it is something to also say, like, we need more trees to be planted in our ecosystems because they're being cut down at a detrimental rate. And we have these, robot technologies where we can plant trees via a drone, or these, robots that roam, so we can plant more trees per day. But really, there just needs to be more companies doing it, right? Because every person out there and every company, emits some sort of CO2. Everyone has a footprint. So how do we, counteract that? So you got some blue lines here. I don't know how to delete these, but that's fine. So mushroom blocks. So mushroom farming in and of itself, a lot of people say it's super sustainable, and I think it can be, but a lot of times these mushroom farms produce a lot of CO2 just growing the mushrooms, right? And it's not shipping from China. It's actually growing the mushrooms, period. So each 5-pound block of, bag of mushrooms produces 2.5 pounds of CO2. So a medium mushroom farm, 4,000 blocks per week, that's 10,000 pounds of CO2 that, you would need about 10,000 trees in a year to counteract that. So that's significant. And that's what we do at Mushroom Revival, is that we plant, minimum of 10,000 trees a year to make sure we're at least carbon neutral, but actually carbon negative. So we're, storing more carbon than we're emitting. And it is, it's like, because we're so new in the mushroom industry in the US, is that there's a lot of waste. We haven't really figured out our mechanisms yet to make it very sustainable. And so there's a lot of plastic that goes into, and a lot of materials that go into producing mushrooms. And unfortunately, a lot are shipped from China, and, they can be produced locally. And, just based on the numbers, like, there are situations where growing locally can be more environmentally detrimental, as backwards as that sounds, as weird as that sounds to say and hear. I'm sure it's true. Unfortunately, not every single case, but there, it can be more detrimental, which is weird. But there's a lot of single-use plastic, which doesn't need to be there. And all that being said, I don't want to, I'm the last person to say that mushrooms are, environmentally detrimental. Just in comparison to these other industries, like, this is a drop in the bucket. There are a million other industries that are way more environmentally detrimental. And so mushrooms as a whole is like a golden child, that has an incredible benefit for people on the planet. But we can do it better, right? We can do it better. And so that was the inspiration to growing cordyceps in those mason jars, or growing them in these reusable bins, is that, and there's companies that grow in these reusable jars, or on logs, is that what I was seeing in the mushroom industry is most people were growing in these plastic bags, and they only use them once. We used plastic bags in our growing technique, but we use them over and over and over and over and over again. And these plastic bins, but we use them infinitely, right? And so I think this is so crucial when it comes to, evolving the mushroom industry, is that we can do it more sustainably. And if anyone is growing mushrooms, or even if you're not even in the mushroom industry, we should all be planting trees, because it's so important, not only for the health of, our carbon cycle, but also our soil health, the biodiversity of our ecosystems. Trees are incredible. And, that is inspiration for creating more sustainable mushroom systems in the US that are scalable, and that can take our reliance off single-use plastic and more on automation that is more sustainable for the environment. And it's interesting because, we grew the mushroom farm in Massachusetts, and I've hired many people in our time. And surprisingly, moving our farms overseas, we've hired more domestic people So that's another argument of, sourcing overseas. Buying local creates more domestic jobs. In my experience, it's actually the opposite. As weird as that is to say, and this is not always true. This is not a steadfast, tried and true statement for every single situation. But in our experience, yeah, this is true in our experience, which is very weird. And not only are we able to hire more people, but actually pay our employees significantly more in salaries than we were before, where we were struggling to keep our farm in operation. So we're paying people just above minimum wage, where now we're paying them significantly more than minimum wage and with benefits and XYZ. So interesting thing to ponder about. But, it's not something that I want to keep up forever, right? And here in the US, we're just so far behind. If I wanted to grow all the mushrooms here in the US, I couldn't at this stage. And I've been talking and we've been in conversation with the biggest mushroom farms here in the US, and they're struggling to keep up with our demand. And, so our future products in next year will contain some US based mushrooms, which will be the first on the market to do it at this scale, which is incredible and one step in the right direction. I do want to have all of our mushroom farms eventually be right down the road. And, but at this stage, we, specifically for chaga as well, it can only really be wild harvested. And in Siberia, the levels of compounds are up to 4 times higher in Siberia compared to in the US or Canada. And they're more sustainable too. Here in the US, they're over harvested, and there's no programs here to prevent over harvesting or to replant birch trees inoculated with chaga, whereas in Siberia, they have those programs set up. And so at this point, I only feel comfortable sourcing from Siberia, where it is more environmentally friendly. It is more sustainable, and to counteract any carbon emissions that we might be producing. That's why we plant trees, right? Because we're conscious of that. We want to make sure that, it is less money in our pockets at the end of the day, but it's something that I can fall asleep at night feeling good about, right? And so this is where we're heading towards is more sustainable mushroom systems in the US, where we can actually scale it and grow these huge mushroom farms. With good practices too. So good laboratory practices, good agricultural practices, good manufacturing practices, production practices, and clinical practices. We have infinite room to grow. Again, we're so far behind compared to China that we just have so much more room to grow in terms of all aspects of mushrooms, and which is very, very exciting. And new extraction technologies. If we're going to go through all the work and carbon emissions of growing these mushrooms, right? We want to make sure that the final product, people can actually absorb the beneficial compounds, right? It's so tedious. It can be environmentally detrimental. And so if we're going through all that work, we want to make sure that that the actual final product can have a benefit, right? And so that's why we're so passionate about correct extraction here at Mushroom Revival, and making sure that every single milliliter, every single gram is the most potent it can be. And it's the most bioavailable and soluble for the human body. Because if we're going through all that effort and months and XYZ, we want to make sure, every dollar counts, every minute counts. So to wrap this whole talk up, going to talk about the future of mushrooms as a whole. So there's over 5 million estimated undescribed species of fungi, right, out there. We've only described 120,000 of them. And out of that 120,000, we've only described 14,000 that are mushrooms. So there's so many species of fungi out there that survive as yeasts, in our bread or our beer, in our soils, but they don't actually produce mushrooms. So it just shows that we barely discovered a drop in the bucket of what is out there for fungi and mushrooms. And so finding and preserving new species is paramount. It's so important. This is the Q Fungarium. We actually have a whole podcast interviewing them, and they have specimens from over 240 countries on all 7 continents of all these fungal specimens that they're keeping in case that there's, huge biodiversity loss and we lose all these species that could be helpful for solving some of our world's biggest problems. And so it's interesting. This is the World Fungi Report, and it showed that about 2,200 new species of fungi were described in 2017. And looking at the map, it's so interesting that a fourth of them are found in Europe, which I don't think of as a very biodiverse place for biology. And it's interesting, only 4% are in Africa, with one of the most biodiverse places in the world, the Congo. And, South America, with also the most biodiverse place in the world, the Amazon, only 12%. It just shows that this is a distribution of research and resources. And so it just shows that there's so much out there that we need to find and work with, which is exciting. And all of those places were just land masses. 70% of the world is ocean or water. And surprisingly, there are things called marine fungi. We have a whole podcast episode on this. And out of 326,000 natural products, 30,000 come from marine life, right? So huge percentage actually come from the ocean. And we found over 1,000 compounds from marine fungi every single year. And, in 1988, compounds from marine fungi were able to treat H1N1 flu virus, as well as HIV, herpes, staph, various cancers. These are not, just to be clear, not the mushrooms that we work with or sell on our website. These are marine fungi, totally different. And after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, there's a reported mass increase of marine fungi. So it shows that, we're bound for another oil spill in the ocean or waterways, and we can partner with marine fungi to clean it up. There are floating islands of trash as big as Texas in our oceans, and there's potential that we can clean it up with marine fungi. And to really partner, so it's one step to collect and, catalog these fungi, to identify them, but it's another step to figure out what the hell's inside of them and how we can use them, to solve our biggest world problems. And so there's various institutes all around the world. There's one in Korea, in China. Mycelium is partnering with API in Canada to really look at all these fungi, especially ones in weird places like Antarctica or, underneath the ocean or, in acidic pools or things like that, and seeing what compounds are in them. And maybe some of them can degrade plastic. Maybe some of them can be a new functional compound for human health. Maybe some of them can, create a new styrofoam. I feel like all these solutions are right at our fingertips. And this is a graph that shows, our ability to find new species with the late age of molecular biology. So the age of being able to sequence DNA. It's huge for our ability to find new species of mushrooms. And it's interesting. I love Cordyceps, so I'm focusing mostly a lot of this presentation on them, but it shows China, USA, and Thailand top countries for Cordyceps. And, I find them all the time, and it's not something that a lot of people are studying or identifying. And I feel like it has huge potential. And the reason I say that is because the last time I went to China, I went to a functional mushroom conference. I went to visit many different farms and interviewed some of the top mycology researchers in the world in China. And they were all talking about this species of cordyceps called Cordyceps guandangensis. It was only discovered in 2005. In 2008, it was named. Only, 10 plus years ago, they figured out how to cultivate it. And over that time, they did tests to make sure it was safe. They figured out what compounds were in it. They did clinical trials over the course of 5 years from 2009 to 2014. And then from 2014 to present, it's one of the most popular cordyceps in China, and it's grown on a mass scale. So that was only in the last, 15, 20 years. That ability is at our fingertips, right? We could stumble upon a new species that could be, one of the most famous functional mushrooms, and someone could find it right in their backyard. So that's really exciting to see that we're just barely scratching the surface of this industry. This mushroom on the left is another cordyceps-like mushroom, Asterias sinclairi, and a compound in it called myriocin is used to treat multiple sclerosis, and it brought in $2.5 billion, billion with a B, in revenue in 2017 just selling this drug, which is incredible. This is some weird fungus growing on a cicada, and $2.5 billion in a year, and it has huge potential. This is something that is right at our feet. And I feel like we are barely scratching the surface, and this has huge, huge potential. Another company to look into, they were featured in a documentary on Netflix that is escaping my mind, but this is Novozymes, and they're really famous. They're many, many billion-dollar industry and company all over the world. They have locations, and they work with fungal enzymes. And so enzymes, you can think of it like stomach acid of mushrooms. And, it's interesting. Fungi are all around us. Every breath that we take, we're breathing in thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of mushroom spores. And every step of our way, from the second we wake up to the second we fall asleep, we are interacting with fungi, whether we know it or not, right? If you eat bread, you're eating fungi. If you're crack open a beer or drink wine at the end of the day, that is fungi. If you like chocolate, fungi are instrumental to that process, right? And so are fungal enzymes. So, from our laundry detergent, there are fungal enzymes in those. From textiles, jeans, and, leather, even paper would not be a thing. A lot of even, cotton and things like that are produced with the help of fungal enzymes. And the list goes on and on. I mean, biodiesel, et cetera, are all produced with the help of fungi. Even Legos, even the plastics in our cars are produced with the help of fungal enzymes. So this is something that is kind of hidden in plain sight, that fungi shape our world, and they are instrumental for the world we know around us. And because they're instrumental, and because not a lot of people study it, because it's so hidden in plain sight, because, they have such potential, and such potential to be eradicated, right? With our biodiversity loss, we need to protect it. So this is Fungi Foundation, Juliana Ferchi. She lives in Chile, and she's one of the, world's top women mycologists, is incredible for helping conserve fungi on a global scale. And so this is really cool, and it's a nonprofit that you can help support. And they have an education sector that they're launching soon, which is very exciting, to get fungal education in schools. And so that's exciting. Maybe your kid someday will have the chance to take a fungal course in their middle or high school. So, and this is something I saw in China. This is a researcher who said that they built schools from preschool all the way to PhD to study mycology. And it's something that we're lacking here in the United States and many countries around the world. So it's something that I'm excited to see be a thing, not only in the United States, but Canada and Australia and, Italy and whoever else is here. We need more fungal education all around the world. So this is the fungi education curriculum by Fungi Foundation, which super excited about. And I think more little kids, if we can shape the younger generations to care about biology, to care about the world around us, to care about mycelium under their feet, to care about mushrooms, the world will be a better place. Like Teleria Watkins II, he was also featured on our mushroom podcast. I think he's the youngest mushroom farmer that I've ever met. I think he started around 6 or 7. I could be wrong. I think he's probably 12 at this point. But he's an author. He's written many books. He has his own mushroom farm and helps his local community with community gardens and things like that. So we definitely need more young farmers and more books. This is Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrick. That was incredible. If you've never read it, please, peek the cover because it is revolutionary for so many people in the scene. Fantastic Fungi. If you've never seen this documentary, please watch it. It's super inspiring. We need more education like this, right? We need more Joe Schmoes out there who's never heard of fungus that think it's all slimy and gross and weird. We need them to be inspired. We need them to actually care about the world around us and form this sacred relationship with mushrooms. And what's cool is that I walked in to a Reishi museum in China without even knowing. I was stopped in to ask for directions, and I just look up and it was a Reishi museum. I was able to see a Cordyceps museum not too far away, and there's a Shiitake museum like an hour away that I didn't get to. So I think mushroom museums would be super cool to see everywhere, so we can have more of that cultural experience and acceptance of mushrooms and fungi. And I also think there's huge potential in our energy space for creating batteries. There's potential for using mushrooms to create battery anode I can't speak to help in the battery process. And we're actually partnering with a company right now to work on a hemp mushroom battery, and that's about all I can say, but it's very, very exciting and it shows huge potential. And entomopathogenic fungi too, those cordyceps, beyond that one specific one that I showed for Mariosin is an interesting statistic that is debatable, but the statistic is that of all humans that have ever lived and died, it's estimated that 50% are from malaria. And there's a researcher that is working with these entomopathogenic fungi to actually cure malaria in mosquitoes. And they're working in Burkina Faso. The researcher is Brian Lovett. We also interviewed him on our podcast. So that is huge. Huge potential for these entomopathogenic fungi, and something that I'm very excited about. Slime molds, something that is not technically a fungi anymore. It got kicked out of the fungal kingdom, but at once it was considered a fungi. And these are instrumental for creating pathways for our architecture. So these little dots that you can see are actually grains of rice or oatmeal that this slime mold is creating the best path towards these center points. And you can see it's on a map of the US you can probably tell these are main cities. And they actually consulted architects, and they figured out that the slime molds actually made better roadways than what previously existed. And they did this in many different countries around the world with topographic maps as well. And the slime molds actually beat out professional architects with the best roadways. to get to places in the quickest amount of time. Mycomaterials, something that I quickly touched upon. So we have the ability to work with fungi to create new styrofoams, new packaging alternatives to replace single-use plastic, or God forbid, the packing peanuts. I think those should be erased from history. So we have the ability to replace these single-use plastics that we get and we throw away with these more sustainable, eco-friendly, biodegradable materials. And they can replace many different industries, right? From leather, from styrofoam and helmets to bags, fashion. Adidas is partnering with Milo to create mushroom shoes, or Lululemon is creating this mycelial yoga mat, which is the coolest thing. We're getting companies popping up to create myco meat, which they're working really hard to make it indistinguishable from the taste of meat and actually more nutritious gram for gram than meat. And so that's incredible to be able to make a more eco-friendly and more nutritious alternative. Even fungal dyes. So our dye system, if you look at the back of some labels, you see yellow 5 or, these dyes, they can be not only harmful for your health, but also the health of the planet. And so Mychroma, we also interviewed them. They're working on dyes to put in foods and drinks. And even Mycotechnology has a bitter blocker, which, can block our bitter taste buds on our tongue so we can use less sugar in our products, which works on the same way as cocaine in our brain. And so any way that we can use less sugar, I think is more beneficial. You're looking at the Stradivari. So this is a $16 million instrument that was made by this revolutionary violin maker. And it has this incredible sound, which makes the price tag so high. But these researchers made this thing called mycowood. And so they were able to replicate the workings of this Stradivari instrument, the wood, and they did a blind test, and people dramatically liked the mycowood better than the Stradivari. And so this is an opportunity to make very expensive instruments for a fraction of the price and make them more accessible for new musicians who want to produce very high-end sounds. It's also, I touched upon this, crucial for space exploration. It's not a matter of if we explore space and other planets of when, and when we do it, can we do it in a way that's a little more eco-friendly? So can we partner with fungi to solve a lot of these problems when we're in space, from radiation, from making sunscreens or protective insulation barriers for the astronauts, etc. Can we make even, structures on Mars made out of mycelium? And so these are tasks that are being worked on in real life right now, currently. And we have a couple podcasts on this actually for fungi being used in space. I talked about our podcast a lot, and we try to cover this. We are a company that goes way beyond supplements, right? Because we're obsessed with the power of mushrooms. And so we bring on experts from all around the world and we geek out about it. So Lyra, my partner that I talked about earlier, we co-host this podcast together. And, I feel like we have over 120 episodes now or somewhere close. And, we have one podcast every week. We're so obsessed with it. We're excited to share this information with the world for free, and geek out with all these people. And so if you do listen to it, definitely, write a review. If you haven't listened to it yet, definitely tune in. It's a lot of fun. And really, it's all about making the world a better place, right? So, we talked about carbon emissions. That's why we plant trees. We planted over 43,000 trees all around the world. This picture is actually a women's co-op in Rwanda, that those are some of the trees that we've planted in the past in Rwanda, and we've planted probably over a dozen different countries all around, with mostly in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. And even just in COVID, we've donated over $15,000 worth of herbal extracts to BIPOC communities in the US. A lot of low income communities as well. So this is important, and we barely scratched the surface of what we can do. But really the deep mission of Mushroom Revival is, just being better, taking better care of the earth than when we came. And it comes down to these three homes again, right? The body, the earth, and the mind. Can we take care of these three homes? And so, little plug, a little, exciting news is that we have, some really exciting products coming out soon. These are mock-ups that we did a while ago, so they're going to look a little bit different from this, but we have the first certified organic mushroom gummies coming out so freaking soon that we're so excited about. So there's going to be 4 different flavors of those. We have the first certified organic mushroom capsules coming to the market that we're so freaking excited about. They're both super potent and really strong, pack a punch. And so we have 4 different flavors of those. And then we have these super delicious powders, unbelievably delicious. We tried them in coffees and smoothies, you name it, and they're so good, super good. Also pack a punch, really high serving size. So you're getting all the good benefits, and that'll come in 3 different flavor combinations. So we have 11 new products coming out soon. And then early next year, we also have, probably 6 new products coming out early next year. So tons of new innovation, very, very excited. So stay tuned for this, and, please reach out if you want to get notified, but we will definitely have it in time for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, for your sales, for stocking up for Christmas, all that stuff, any holiday that you celebrate. So super, super excited. And we are also running a sale right now. So we have till the end of the week, till Friday at midnight, we have a 10% off sale for our single tinctures. So use the code GoodHabits10 at checkout. And it's also on the banner of our site. So definitely check that out as a shameless plug. If this inspired you and you want to stock up on the goodies, definitely check that out, because it's coming to a close pretty soon. The other thing is, we have a podcast episode that we're working on that I would love as much help with. And we're trying to get mushroom in as many languages as possible. Going back to making this a global mushroom community. There's so many people even just joining this webinar that are from all over the world. As far as Australia, there are so many people that speak so many different languages. So we're looking for native speakers, and we have a list. Please reach out. We'll send you the form so you can check what languages we have so far and what we're looking for. But it'll be a really fun episode. So you can see, you can hear mushroom in all these different languages, which I think is really cool. So much love, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and spending your Tuesday night with me. I went way over the time that I estimated, but I had a lot of fun. So I'll open it up for Q&A right now, and I'll probably spend 10 minutes with Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up. So if you want to go to the chat box, and then I will stop sharing my screen so you can see my face again. Hopefully everyone can see my face again. All right, so I'm just going back to the chat box. It looks like Sarah from London. That's awesome. We have someone interested in the book, if you reach out to support@mushroomrevival.com, you can get a PDF of that microremediation book. And we stopped printing it. So, I got a direct message. They would love to purchase it. What would mean the world to us is that you just spread the word about the company. And if you want to buy some products too, that would go a long way as well. Leaving reviews, that means the world. We'd love to receive them. And that means a lot, but happy to give you the PDF for free. Love Reishi, Mycelium, Arcelium, definitely. Unfortunately, can't talk about other people's or other companies' products specifically, but I would just look at the ingredients and even ask them. I would ask for companies, lab results. I would ask them, what are they specifically, and see what kind of answer they give you. Some companies are very secretive, so that might tell you a bit about if you want to work with them or not. So please tell us where we can buy Fruiting Body or extracts. We do. Mushroom Revival, we have that sale going on, Good Habits 10. You can get 10% off. If you want to stock up, that is a good place to get them. If you are not a tincture person, you can wait until we launch the capsules, powders, and gummies, which are so freaking good.
Wow.
Awesome
And podcast, listening from Florida.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Very well.
Do you have a question?
Podcast.
Thanks.
No,
I appreciate it.
Comment.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Scott, for tuning in and for tuning in for the podcast. It means a lot.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I love to do it. Mushrooms are so fun to talk about. Will this slideshow be shared post presentation? We will have a recording. So not the actual slideshow, but you can watch the recording and go slide by slide and play it at whatever speed you want. Seems like we got another message. You are awesome. Love listening to you and your podcasts. And that seems to be a personal message. So I'll just leave it at that. And the ocean captures CO2, the whales save the oceans. Definitely. Yeah. I think there's so much potential for our oceans that we have barely even scratched the surface on. I mean, I think the statistic is we've discovered 1% of the ocean, which is mind-boggling. So, I feel like there's some crazy alien sea creatures down there and fungi that we've barely even scratched the surface about. Excellent presentation. Love your podcast. Question: are there labs that you recommend to do high quality mushroom analysis? Yeah, absolutely. If you want to reach out to our support email, support@mushroomrevival.com, we'll give you some really high quality labs that we recommend, that we use, that are, ISO certified and et cetera, that specify in mushroom testing. But that being said, there's so much more to test. There's so much more to learn about in terms of testing. We're so far behind in the industry, but yeah, I'll give you those labs. Wow, what passion. Alex been talking for 2 hours, must have taken Cordyceps. Absolutely. That's what you get when you take Cordyceps. Another non-cultivated question: what effect do the forest wildfires have on fungi? I'm not an expert on the relationship with fire and fungi. I do know that some fungi don't thrive in wildfires, and then others do. And they need wildfires to grow. And so you see morels as an example. They will pop up post wildfire, and some plants as well do really well. And their seeds actually germinate in very high temperatures. So, some life, wildfires are natural. They're supposed to happen. And so some life actually thrives post wildfires, and some fungi actually do. Steve Axford is someone that we brought on our podcast, and he has a whole mini documentary on fungi post wildfires if you want to check it out. He's a really amazing photographer. He does some beautiful time lapses. So I would definitely check that out. Yay for gummies. Yeah, I'm unbelievably excited. They taste amazing. We've been working on these products for years now, and we're very, very excited to launch them. We put a lot of hard work in them. So we're excited. Totally worth the extra time. Thank you so much. Thanks for staying. I know it was way over. I think we're almost an hour and a half over what we expected. So really, really appreciate it. Which variety will be the best for immune system? I'll just answer that part of the question. I'm not a doctor, and none of our products are approved by the FDA to treat, cure, diagnose any disease or illness. So I can't speak to that half of the question. But all functional mushrooms help support the immune system. So they're packed with these compounds called 1,3,1,6 beta glucans, which have over 6,000 studies on them to show that they are supportive for your immune system. So really, I mean, if you want the best, bang for your buck, is the daily 10 has all 10 mushrooms in it. That's, most well-rounded way to get the most amount of mushrooms in your system on a daily basis. My first tincture was the Mush 10, and I have the Focus 2. Really excited for the gummies. Me too. I'm also very excited about them. The Mush 10 and the Focus are great tinctures as well. And we will have gummies of the 10 and the Focus. I will go to your website and spread word to support and leave a positive review, and go to support to request PDF. Awesome. Super pumped. Thanks a lot. Love the job you're doing. Thank you for tuning in and supporting us. Final comment, please include both your names when you do your podcast introduction. Absolutely. Yeah, we will do that from now on. Lyra's in the room with me, so she probably heard that comment, but we will chat afterwards to include that. Really appreciate you offering this free of charge. Love your passion. This is fantastic info. I can't get enough. How can I get more info about how to complement my diet trying to use food functionally? So that's a large question, and I'm still figuring it out. I'm still figuring out habits to help support my health, including diet. Off the top of my head, I don't have any books just right off the bat, but something in my experience is that every body is different. And so some people do really well based on their genetics or, their way of life with, say, a ketogenic diet, or some people I heard do really well with a carnivore diet, or some people do really well with a vegan diet. And then some people is the complete opposite. So really, I think, to wrap it up, try what feels good for you. Try a bunch of different things. And if it feels good for you, great. I would go for that. And, everything in moderation. And also, a quote from one of my teachers is, a bowl of ice cream eaten with love is 1,000 times better than a kale salad eaten with hate. So, it's really the intentions that go into it. It's not, if you have these bad cycles in your head of self-harm and calling yourself bad and XYZ, it doesn't matter what you eat. It's really the thoughts in your head. So hopefully that helps. I know it totally didn't maybe answer your question. It was a little 10,000 feet, but hopefully that helps.
That was great. Thanks.
Yeah. I will
let
take
you go.
I will take any last questions, but I just want to wrap it up. Again, we're running the sale until Friday. The code is GoodHabits10 for 10% off. Website, mushroomrevival.com. People already probably knew. And the podcast on all streaming platforms. Looks like there's no final questions. So thank you. We will send follow-up emails with the recording and anything else. Please reach out. Any questions, if you fall asleep and anything that I just said in this jam-packed session, spurs any questions. I will take any mushroom questions any day. And we have a whole team of mushroom lovers to help you out. So much love, everyone. That wraps up the webinar. Have a great rest of your Tuesday night and great rest of your week and year. Much love. Peace.